Silence fell before dawn, one of those silences that send shivers down your spine and announce that something terrible is about to happen. In that stifling early morning, the Santa Aurora farm seemed to breathe a different air, heavy, almost sad, as if the land already knew it was about to lose someone irreplaceable. But no one imagined this yet, not at that moment. Not while the routine continued its course, with the distant crowing of roosters and the smell of wet grass filling the entire yard. The truth is that for many years, that farm lived in peace. United workers, laughter during breaks, long conversations on the wooden verandas, and a rare sense of belonging, as if each person there had been chosen by the land itself. And at the center of it all, always walking with discreet steps, was Miguel Andrade, a man whom few noticed, but on whom everyone depended, even without realizing it. A simple man, soft-spoken, one of those who carry the weight of the world without complaining. Miguel was the first to wake up and the last to leave. The kind of worker who treated each animal like family, who knew the mood of the land, the hunger of the cows, the fear of the horses, and even the secrets of the wind that crossed the pasture at nightfall. He was the silent heart of the farm, the invisible guardian, the wounded worker who carried old scars but never let anyone see them. His presence was so constant, it seemed eternal, and perhaps that's why no one imagined what would happen when he was taken away. That day, however, everything seemed normal, at least on the surface. The other farmhands played while preparing their harnesses. The still timid sun kissed the treetops, and the smell of fresh coffee mingled with that of damp earth. But Miguel wasn't the same. There was a weight in his eyes, something dark, deep, as if a shadow was silently growing behind his tired smile. And this shadow didn't come from the earth, nor from the animals. It came from people. Because behind the fences and sheds, exciting stories are also made of injustices, hidden pains, and decisions that can change an entire life in seconds. And Miguel was about to experience this firsthand. A conflict was beginning to form, small as a spark, but powerful enough to set everything he knew ablaze. And while everyone laughed and worked without imagining anything, that spark was heading towards his destiny with the cruel precision that only real life is capable of. The boss, Sir Alvaro Montero, a tough man with a gruff voice and an authoritarian gaze, had been acting differently for days. The atmosphere between him and Miguel had changed, although no one could explain why. Whispered comments, sideways glances, orders that were too short for someone who had always trusted that worker completely. It seemed as if a silent poison was being spread there, and Miguel, even without understanding why, already felt its bitter taste. But that morning, something finally happened, something that no one dared to talk about aloud, but that everyone felt in the air, like an omen announcing the beginning of a tragedy. The birds stopped singing, the oxen grew restless, even the farm dogs cowered near the sheds. And Miguel just took a deep breath, wiped the sweat from his brow, and kept walking, without imagining that this would be the last dawn in which his steps would touch that land he loved so much. But what really triggered the great rupture, that's yet to come. And when you find out, you'll understand why Fazenda Santa Aurora was never the same again. And as Miguel walked through the corral, observing every detail as if memorizing a place before leaving, the wind seemed to whisper a warning that no one wanted to hear. The tension grew, silent, invisible, but as real as the hard ground beneath his worn boots. It was as if the farm itself was holding its breath, waiting for the moment when everything would turn upside down. And you, who are listening to this story now, perhaps feel that tightness too, because there are things that don't need to be said to be understood. The truth is that moving stories like this reveal something profound about life. Sometimes, the person who holds everything together the most is precisely the one who suffers the most in silence. And when that person disappears, everything crumbles inside, even if no one notices at the time. Michael was that kind of man. And even before the fall happened, you could already feel the ground shaking beneath his feet. And that's why I want to take this moment, before revealing what really happened, to ask something important of you, the viewer. If this story is touching your heart, comment below and tell us what you would change in this situation. What attitude would you have taken? What would your decision be if you were in the boss's place or in Miguel's place? These comments help create a community that thinks, feels, and connects with real stories like this one. Also, leave a like, because that shows YouTube that this type of emotional, profound, and human content deserves to reach more people. And of course, if you're not already subscribed, subscribe now, so you don't miss the continuation of this journey, and I guarantee that what comes next will move you in a way that few stories do. Together, we are building a space for change, reflection, and transformation. And every gesture you make, the like, the comment, the subscription, strengthens this movement. So join in, because the most intense part of this story is yet to come. And it is precisely in the next chapter that you will discover the exact moment when Miguel's destiny changes forever, and the reason why the Santa Aurora farm lost its soul on the day he was forced to leave. Miguel had always been the kind of man whose arrival went unnoticed, but whose departure was missed by everyone. After that strange dawn, he continued his journey through the farm as he had for over 15 years, without imagining that each of his gestures carried the weight of something about to break. The Santa Aurora farm was large, vibrant, full of details that demanded care, and Miguel knew each one of them as if they were parts of himself. He was the one who woke up before everyone else to check on the cattle, who knew when a cow was about to calve just by the way she looked at the horizon. He was the one who resolved fights between farmhands with few words, who fixed the broken fence in the middle of the night, who returned from town bringing medicine for the sick calf without anyone having to ask. Many said the farm was too big to depend so much on a single man. But the truth, that deep truth no one likes to admit, was that Miguel was the silent foundation that held everything together. While others talked, he acted. While some created problems, he found solutions. Not because he wanted recognition, but because that's how his soul worked. He carried within him the archetype of the guardian, the one who protects the territory, the community, and order, even when no one notices. And precisely for that reason, he almost never received the credit he deserved. So Alvaro, the boss, knew his worth, but too much time spent together makes some men start to believe that what is essential is replaceable. And that's where the tragedy always begins, when the indispensable becomes obvious. Miguel never complained, never asked for anything more than respect. And even when that respect was lacking, he swallowed hard, took a deep breath, and carried on. Some people are born to care and forget to take care of themselves. Those who observed Miguel closely noticed small signs that told stories he never dared to speak. The permanent tiredness in his eyes, the way he massaged his right hand after much exertion, the old pain that seemed to reside in his shoulder since an accident that almost took him out of work years before. But he never stopped. He never said, "Not today." He was like an emotional wall, carrying pain, memories, and even injustices that had remained trapped deep in his chest for too long. And there was also that discreet kindness, which few knew how to see. He would set aside the best grass for the boss's old mare, save pieces of bread to feed the dogs that lived near the barn, help young Tiaguinho, the youngest of the farmhands, learn the job, even when the boy made more mistakes than he got right. One day, Tiaguinho asked why Miguel never got angry. Miguel just gave a short, somewhat sad smile and replied with something that stuck with me. "Those who have lost too much in life learn that shouting doesn't help." These small phrases, these small gestures showed that Miguel carried with him more than just responsibilities. He carried a past that no one really knew, a past marked by losses, by disappointments, by pains that time did not heal, it only silenced. Sometimes, during long afternoons at work, he would stand still, observing the horizon as if searching for someone, as if waiting for a memory to finally leave him in peace. And it was precisely his silence that made him so strong and so vulnerable. It was easy to forget that men like Miguel also break, because the more someone endures the world alone, the more the world seems to test their limits. And in that week when everything started to fall apart, Miguel had been feeling something different, something heavy, unsettling, as if a threat was growing nearby, about to explode. He tried to ignore it, tried to move on, but the body doesn't lie, the soul doesn't lie. The animals were restless, the farmhands were acting strangely, and the boss even more so. And Miguel, even without understanding why, knew that something was turning against him. Life has these ironies. Precisely those who protect the most end up the most unprotected when the worst comes. And deep down, he felt it. He felt that perhaps he was being prepared for another fall, perhaps the biggest of all. And before continuing this story, before revealing the next step in this silent collapse, I want to know from you, who are here with me, have you ever seen someone like Miguel in real life? Comment below with the word guardian if you've ever met someone who carried the weight of the world on their shoulders without ever asking for anything in return. I want you to leave a comment, a like, and subscribe, because all of that helps this story reach more people who also feel, who also get emotional, who also understand the power of the invisible. And now, let's continue together, because what comes next will show the exact moment when Miguel's world begins to crumble. On that stifling afternoon, the air felt too heavy, almost difficult to breathe. Miguel walked through the pasture as he did every day, but something inside him was restless. The animals were nervous, the farmhands avoided looking him in the eye, and even the wind seemed to carry a strange murmur, one of those that enters the soul before it even enters the ear. The feeling that something wrong was about to happen grew slowly, silently, like a crack in an old wall. At first no one notices, but when they do, it's too late. And there, in the heart of the Santa Aurora farm, that crack was about to open in a way that no one could mend. It all started with a rumor, a malicious piece of gossip planted in the right place, at the right time, by someone who had long harbored envy for Miguel. Among the farmhands, there were always disputes, small rivalries, but nothing that went beyond the door of the barracks. But this time, the seed of discord found fertile ground. A single snide comment, a well-told lie, was enough to transform Miguel, the most loyal man on that farm, into a suspect for something he would never do. They said he was stealing feed, that he was selling sacks of corn on the side, that he was taking advantage of the boss's trust. An absurd slander, but told with such conviction that even the walls seemed to believe it. The worst part is that this lie reached the ears of someone it shouldn't have, so Alvaro. And he wasn't an easy man to convince otherwise once suspicion took hold. The boss, who for years had seen Miguel as a kind of right-hand man, began to view him with eyes clouded by wounded pride, by the feeling of having been deceived. And when a powerful man begins to see someone as a threat, even without proof, the truth ceases to matter. Everything becomes shadow, everything becomes an attack. And that's exactly what happened. So Alvaro spent 2 days observing Miguel from a distance, saying nothing, asking nothing, just observing, as if he were waiting for the slightest slip-up to turn suspicion into condemnation. Miguel, on the other hand, had no idea what was happening. He continued his work, caring for the animals, solving problems, putting out silent fires as he always did. But that week, even his breaths were being used against him. Tensions reached their peak when one of the bags of animal feed disappeared from the storage room. Miguel hadn't touched it, he knew that, but nobody wanted to hear his side of the story. For Seu Alvaro, that was the final proof that he had been betrayed. The boss saw the supposed absence as a personal blow. as if Miguel had stabbed him in the back after so many years of trust. And that's how blind pride works. It doesn't accept dialogue, it doesn't accept calm, it doesn't admit doubt. It simply reacts. When the call came, Miguel felt a shiver run down his spine. He entered his boss's office with his hat in his hands, his head bowed as always, but his heart racing. So Alvaro didn't ask for explanations, didn't give him a chance to defend himself, didn't even offer Miguel a chance to speak. The boss exploded all at once, as if he had been holding back that fury for years. He said harsh, cutting, unfair words. Words that struck Miguel's chest like blows from a sledgehammer. He accused, shouted, pointed his finger, calling him ungrateful, dishonest, a traitor. Miguel tried to breathe, tried to say he would never do that he knew nothing. He tried to talk about years of loyalty, sleepless nights, the pain he silently endured. But his voice was too small to pierce the wall of rage that dominated the boss. And worse, when the other farmhands approached the door, instead of defending Miguel, they lowered their eyes. Their silence was the final sentence. It was there, in that moment, that the rupture happened. A slow, painful, devastating rupture. There was no shouting, no scandal, just that "You're dismissed," said with absolute coldness. Words that cut Miguel inside like a razor. He stood still for a few seconds, as if the world had stopped along with him, and when he finally understood that there was no turning back, he simply put his hat on, took a deep breath, and left. Each step seemed to weigh twice as much. Each look from the others hurt like an arrow. The entire farm seemed to fall silent as he crossed the yard. Even the animals sensed it. And Miguel felt as if he were leaving behind not only his job, but a part of himself, part of his history, part of his dignity, an unjust, cold expulsion that took from him much more than just his employment. And before we move on to the next chapter of this downfall that will deepen even further, I want to hear from you. Comment below with the phrase, "Injustice hurts," so I know you're with me on this story. Also, leave a like and subscribe so you don't miss the continuation, because what comes next shows how Miguel's world began to crumble in a way no one imagined. Miguel's departure that late afternoon left a scar that no one could ignore, even if many pretended not to see it. As soon as he crossed the main gate, that gate that so often opened before sunrise and closed only after the moon was high, something changed in the air. It wasn't just his physical absence. It was as if a fundamental piece had been ripped from the heart of the Santa Aurora farm. And when the heart fails, everything starts to fail along with it. In the following days, the previously light-hearted atmosphere turned into a constant weight on everyone's shoulders. The farmhands, who always joked around during work, began to argue over anything. There were fights over silly things, small outbursts of irritation, silences that conveyed what no one dared to say. Miguel's presence was missed, an immense, suffocating absence. It was as if the invisible soul of the farm had left with him. The tasks that once functioned like a perfect machine began to fall apart. The animals, accustomed to Miguel's patient touch, became skittish. The cattle took longer to approach the troughs. The calves cried more at night, as if afraid of something they couldn't understand. One of the mares, the one Miguel always petted before leaving the stable, refused to eat for days. The veterinarian was called, but upon examining the animal, he simply said, "This is a lack of people. Some animals sense absence, worse than people." And that wasn't all. The land also seemed resentful. The crops that had grown strong began to show signs of exhaustion. Irrigation failed, fences broke more frequently, and no one knew exactly where to begin. Because the real problem wasn't technical, it was emotional, it was symbolic, it was the absence of the guardian. When the archetype falls apart, everything it supported begins to crumble. At night, the silence became even more frightening. Not the calm, usual silence of the countryside, but a heavy, bitter silence, the kind that makes you look at the door with every creak. Some pedestrians avoided walking alone to the barn after dark. They said that something was wrong. that the dogs were restless, that the wind seemed to be blowing differently. It was as if the farm were in mourning, a living, pulsating mourning that spread everywhere. And at the center of this silent chaos was So Alvaro, the boss. He tried to keep his chest puffed out and his posture rigid, as he always had, but the truth was that since his expulsion, he hadn't slept properly. He spent long hours sitting on the porch, staring at the dark pasture, brooding over thoughts he would never admit aloud. His pride prevented him from acknowledging what he was feeling. Guilt, a heavy, painful guilt that pounded in his chest like a hammer. He listened to the murmurs of the farmhands, heard the flaws in their work, and realized that the farm had lost its natural order. But he said nothing, and every time the image of Miguel silently carrying his things appeared in his mind, he felt a pang, as if something inside him had been broken. It was regret, but he called it exhaustion. It was longing, but he called it routine. It was fear, but he called it hard work. Even So Alvaro's wife noticed the difference. One night she found him standing in the hallway, lost in thought, staring at the hat Miguel had forgotten hanging on the hook by the entrance. He didn't touch it, just stood there, as if that simple piece held all the answers he didn't want to face. The truth is, Miguel wasn't just an employee. He was the balance. He was the silent presence that held everything together. And now, nothing was tied up. The farm, which had once pulsed like a living organism, seemed to wither away day by day. And each failure, each fight, each animal that fell ill seemed to cry out the same thing. Miguel was missed. He is missed. He will continue to be missed. The older folks in the surrounding area used to say that certain people are like invisible pillars. Nobody sees them, but when they fall, everything crumbles with them. And there, in that sad setting, that phrase never made so much sense. The Santa Aurora farm was fading away, and everyone knew it, even if nobody dared to say it aloud. And before we move on to the next part, where you'll see the full extent of the consequences of this injustice, leave a comment below with the phrase, "The soul of the farm is gone," so I know you're following and experiencing this story with me. Comment, like, and subscribe, because it helps a lot and shows me that you're here experiencing every emotion side by side. Let's continue, because what comes next reveals an even deeper side to this collapse. The revelation wasn't grand. There were no shouts, no audience, no show. The truth came as it usually does in the most moving and profound real-life stories, silent, unexpected, and inevitable. It all began on a cloudy afternoon when Tiaguinho, the youngest farmhand, appeared in So Alvaro's office trembling from head to toe. The boy, who had always seen Miguel as a kind of mentor, carried in his eyes a mixture of fear and regret, like someone about to confess a sin that had been gnawing at his heart for days. For a few seconds, Tiaguinho couldn't say anything. He took a deep breath, swallowed hard, and finally let slip the phrase that would change everything. "Boss, Miguel never touched the sacks. It was me. I was the one who got the count wrong, and who believed the lie they made up about him." So Alvaro slowly raised his head, as if the world was spinning at a different speed. The silence that settled inside was so dense it seemed almost palpable. The boy continued, now truly crying, confessing that he had overheard two farmhands, the same ones who had always been envious of Miguel, plotting the lie to blame him. Tiaguinho explained that, fearing being blamed for his mistake in the count, he ended up believing the rumor and passing on the information without verifying anything. It was as if someone had ripped the ground out from under So Alvaro's feet. The truth came like a dry, precise, humiliating blow. Everything he had done, the accusations, the contempt, the expulsion, had been based on a farce, a damned lie, and he, with his blind pride, his deepest shadow, had fueled it all with an arrogant conviction that now burned in his conscience like a live ember. So Alvaro remained alone in his office for hours after Tiaguinho left. The door stayed closed, but outside, some claimed to have heard something they never imagined. The boss crying. It wasn't crying from physical pain. It was crying from guilt, a regret so profound it seemed to pierce the walls. He had destroyed the most loyal man who had ever set foot on that farm, and he had done so without even giving him a chance to defend himself. When he finally emerged, his face was different. The tough, unbeatable man seemed to have aged years in just a few hours. He walked to the yard and called the farmhands. His voice, once firm, was now choked with emotion. He told them what he had discovered. He admitted his mistake, and then something profound happened. The employees, one by one, began to confess what they had felt since the day of the expulsion. "Boss, the farm died the moment Miguel passed through that gate. Ever since he left, nothing works. Nothing." He held everything together, even us. It was as if each person was releasing a weight they had been carrying in their chest since that day. And that hurt so Alvaro even more. It hurts to hear what everyone knew, except him. It hurts to realize that pride can be more destructive than any storm. The shadow that Carl Jung describes, the hidden dark part that we try to ignore, was finally there, exposed, staring at the boss with the coldness of a mirror. "I need to find him," he said, his voice hoarse, almost broken. That same evening, he and two other farmhands set out along the dirt road in search of Miguel. They went to Donna Nazare's shop, asked locals, and followed trails Miguel used to take when he needed silence. But nobody knew where he was. Some said they had seen him walking with a backpack. Others claimed he had hitchhiked on the main road. Each person told a piece of the story, but nothing led to the right destination. With each empty response, the despair grew. The fear of having lost him forever began to encircle Alvaro's chest like a tight noose. He kept repeating to himself that there was still time, that Miguel needed to hear his truth, his plea for forgiveness, his repentance. But one question hammered in everyone's mind: what if it was already too late? Night fell and the search continued, now guided by lamps and the anguish that grew with each step. The farm, far behind, remained immersed in an even heavier silence, as if awaiting the outcome of something bigger than everyone there. It was as if the earth wanted Miguel back. But the world sometimes doesn't give back what it takes away. And before we move on to the next chapter of this intense revelation, comment below with the phrase, "The truth always comes out," so I know you're on this journey with me. Leave a like, subscribe, and let's continue together, because what comes next has an even greater emotional impact. From that night when Alvaro desperately went out on the road looking for Miguel, the Santa Aurora farm never regained its breath. The following days arrived gray and dragging, as if the sun had lost the will to rise over that piece of land. And even as time passed, Miguel's absence remained ingrained in every corner, in the silent stable, in the neglected pasture, in the big house that no longer had the same shine. It was as if the soul of the farm had been ripped away without warning, and no one knew how to sew it back together. The farmhands tried to resume their routine, but everything seemed out of place. Each task required twice the effort. Each decision seemed incomplete. It was impressive to realize how a single man had been able to sustain so many structures without anyone noticing. And that's the painful part of real life. We only see the value of the invisible after it disappears. Miguel, with his calm demeanor, his discreet presence, and his silent loyalty, had left a void that couldn't be filled with substitutes, tools, or new rules. No matter how hard they tried to reorganize the farm, something essential was lost. The cattle remained skittish, the crops struggled to grow, and the emotional climate among the workers oscillated between guilt and frustration. There were long, heavy stares that said without words, if he were here, none of this would be happening. But Miguel wasn't, and that absence weighed like a living shadow, an emotional ghost that walked among the fences, permeating memories without asking permission. Meanwhile, Alvaro changed every day. The man who once walked with firm steps now avoided speaking much, avoided giving orders, even avoided being alone, because it was precisely when he was alone that guilt consumed him whole. He relived the scene of the expulsion repeatedly, trying to imagine how he hadn't seen what had always been right in front of him. Miguel had never been just an employee. He was the emotional foundation of that place. He was the silent guardian that Jung describes, the one who protects not only with strength, but with presence, with instinct, with soul. Many nights, the boss would sit on the porch, looking at the gate through which Miguel had left. Sometimes he imagined seeing him return, walking slowly, hat in hand, ready to start again. On other nights, he feared he would never see him again, that Miguel had disappeared into the world like so many simple people disappear, without leaving a trace, without leaving an address, carrying only the pain of having been wronged. And what perhaps hurt so Alvaro most was this uncertainty, not knowing if Miguel was continuing his life, if he had found another place to call home, or if the solitude of the road had been too hard for a man who had always given more than he had received. There were rumors, of course. There always are. Some said Miguel had gone to the big city to look for work. Others said he was seen near a river, as if thinking of starting over somewhere far away. There were even those who claimed he no longer wanted anything to do with farms after everything he'd been through. But the truth, that deep truth that never fully arrives, is that nobody knew for sure. Miguel became an absent presence, a living memory, a name that echoed through the farm's corridors like a prayer that never finds an answer. As the months passed, the Santa Aurora farm continued to function, because life goes on, even when we're not ready. But it never recovered its essence. It never again had the same brilliance, the same unity, the same harmony that seemed natural when Miguel was there. It was as if every day a piece of history was being rewritten, but without the right ink, without the emotional tone that Miguel brought with his simple gestures. He had become a symbol, an almost sacred memory, living proof that there are people who sustain entire worlds with what they carry in their hearts. And it's impossible not to reflect on this. How many Miguels are there in the world? How many silent, loyal, invisible people hold up life in so many places without ever receiving recognition? How many are expelled, discarded, ignored, even though they are the vital force that keeps everything standing? Ingratitude is a wound that takes a long time to heal, and on that farm, it never healed. Miguel's ghost didn't appear as a haunting. He was in the things that stopped working, in the silences that grew longer, in the nights that weighed heavily on everyone's hearts. The true haunting was longing, the longing for something that no one noticed while they had it. And now, before we continue, because this story still breathes, still pulsates, still has open paths, leave the phrase, "His absence still lives here," in the comments, so I know you're walking side by side with me through this emotion. Your participation helps this content reach more people. Leave a like, subscribe, comment, because stories like this deserve to be felt together.